All right, this is part 2 of lesson 5-6, graphing inequalities in two variables. We're actually going to work on solving an inequality with one variable listed now, but on a coordinate plane. So it's kind of like when you had functions and you replaced the y value with 0 and you solved, or if there was a 0, you replaced it with a y and that was your function, kind of like a weird thing. That's kind of the idea here. So even though there's only one variable, we're not graphing this on a number line, we're graphing it on a coordinate plane. So how do I do that? First thing I want to do is pretend like this is an equal sign and solve for x. Okay, so this is like x plus 7 equals 5, and then subtract 7 from both sides, x equals -2. Okay, so this is where my line is going to be at -2. So on my x-axis, I'm going to go back to -2 and put a dot. And there is no y variable here, so I'm going to make this a vertical line. Now, do I make it a dotted vertical line or a solid vertical line? I go back to, this tells me where my line is, so now I'm going back to my inequality. It has the line underneath it, so it's going to be a solid vertical line. So here's my vertical line. Now, which way are my solutions, right? Are they over here or are they over here? Well, it says x, if I left this, the inequality symbol, it would say x is less than or equal to -2. So it's all the numbers smaller than -2. Every single point on my graph that has an x coordinate, doesn't matter what the y is, has an x coordinate of -2 or less. Right? So I'm going to shade in all of these that are less than -2. I'm not going to shade this side over here that's bigger than -2. I want to shade everything that's less than -2. Okay? So that's all we're doing. We're just figuring out where our line goes. It's either going to be a vertical or horizontal line, and then shading left or right. That's it. All right, so x minus 2 is greater than 2. Add 2 to both sides. X is greater than 4. So on my x-axis, I'm going to go over here to 4. Oops, sorry. It's going to be a dotted line, since there's no line underneath the inequality symbol. And I'm going to shade everything bigger than 4. So I got to shade this direction. All the numbers on this side of 4, right? Not any of the numbers on the number line, on this vertical line, because it's dotted, but everything to the right of that. Okay, for this guy, -x plus 1 is less than -3. To figure out just where my line is on the x-axis, I want to kind of pretend like this is an equal sign. So -x plus 1 equals -3. Add 1 to both sides, -x equals -2. Divide both sides by -1, so x equals 1. Right? So on the x-axis, I'm going to go to +1. If I look at my inequality symbol, there is no line underneath it, so it's going to be a dotted line through this guy. And then how do I know which direction to shade, right? I can't just replace this with my inequality symbol because I actually divided by a negative, so it should have switched. So I'm just going to pick a side, pick a point, and see if it works or not. I always use 0, 0, right? If 0, 0 works, I know I shade this side of my line. If 0, 0 is not a solution, I know I shade this side of my line. Easy peasy. So if I plug in 0, 0, if I plug in a 0 here, and I don't have a y value. So I plug in a 0 here, that's 0 plus 1 is less than -3. So +1 is less than -3. Is that true? Is 1 less than -3? No. So this point right here is not a solution. I cannot plug a 0 in for x and that be true. So this side's not going to be shaded, which means this side will be shaded. Your shading has to go on one side or the other. There's never a situation where you're just not going to shade, right? Unless it's not an inequality. So if it's not shaded on one side, then you automatically know it has to be shaded on the other. Okay, next one, I'm going to switch up colors, green. -x minus 7 is greater than or equal to -6. If I treated this like an equal sign, add 7 on both sides, -6 plus 7 is 1. So -x equals 1, so x would equal -1. So on my x-axis, I go back here to -1, plot it. I'm going to draw a vertical line through it. Is that vertical line dotted or solid? It's going to be solid because there's this line underneath my inequality symbol. And then how do I know which way to shade, right? I'm going to pick 0, 0, plug it in, see if it works. If it doesn't, I shade over here. If this does work, then I shade on this side, okay? So 0 minus 7 is greater than or equal to negative 6. Negative 7 is greater than or equal to negative 6. Well, we know it's not equal to negative 6, so is negative 7 bigger than negative 6? If you're down in a hole 7 feet, are you higher up than somebody who's only down in that hole 6 feet? No, you're further down. So that is not true. So 0, 0 does not work, which means if I'm not shading this side of my line, I gotta shade this other side of my line. We call this line the boundary line. When we're graphing our inequalities, we call this our boundary line. This is the boundary. All of our solutions are over here up until this boundary line, and then they stop. That's the boundary, right? So this line is our boundary line. Everything to the left of it, those are all of our solutions. Okay, 3x minus 20 is less than negative 17. Add 20 to both sides, that's 3. So 3x x is less than 3. Divide both sides by 3. X is less than 1, positive 1. X is less than 1. So on my number line, I go to positive 1. It's a dotted line because there's no line under the inequality symbol. And my shaded part is less than 1. So it's everything to the left. I know some of you guys are going to be confused, like, well, how did you know to just graph that? But then over here you used an equal sign, blah, 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 right? Well, this one's really straightforward. This one's easy. This guy isn't so easy because there's a negative x. And I know when I divide by negatives, my inequality sign switches and it just gets super tricky, right? So for any of these, you can figure out where your line goes, the correct position, by turning this into an equal sign and solving for x. So that's what I did here, and I figured out, okay, my equal sign, or my line is at negative 1. So I need to draw it there. But then how do I know which way to shade? Is it here or here? And that's when I just pick a point. I always go with 0, 0, plug it in and see if it works. If it does, then you shade that side. If it does not, then you shade the other side. Done. For this one, I could have done the same thing. I would have got x equals 1, drawn my line, picked 0, 0, plugged it in, see if it worked, right? That's all I had to do, and it would have worked, so I shaded here. I just knew, since there was no negative sign here, I could have just solved it and got the answer all together. There wasn't anything tricky to it. Okay, let's see if we can figure this one out. Negative, so these has a negative sign, so it's going to get funny. Let's see if we can just solve for x, and I'll show you what I mean. It's quicker to do it the other way, but I'll show you what I mean. All right, so negative 2x plus 11 is greater than or equal to 15. Then I want to get rid of the 11. Negative 2x is greater than or equal to 4. And then I divide by negative 2. X, since I divided both sides by a negative, my sign switches. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. So this is my line. This is my answer. So on my x-axis, I'm going to go over to negative 2. My inequality sign has the line under it, so it's going to be a solid vertical line through negative 2. And then my shaded part is less than that. It's less than negative 2. Where's all the numbers smaller than negative 2 on the x-axis? This way. Okay, the other way I could have done that is just to change this to an equal sign. So this would have been equals, equals. This would have been an equal sign. X is equal to negative 2, so I would have known to draw my line here, and I just didn't know which side to shade. Is it this side or is it this side? I don't know. So I would have picked 0, 0, plugged it in, and if that worked as a solution, if that made this a true statement, then I would have shaded this way. In this case, it would not have worked. So since 0, 0 didn't work, that means none of these answers on the right side of my line would work, so I shade the left. I hope that's making sense. Let me know if you have questions.